Hi, I'm Robert Jeffrey, and today I'll be discussing my lesson plans for my methods of teaching the humanities class. I created my lesson plans for a World War II unit that focuses on the Pacific War. The unit begins with a look back in history to the first contact between the United States and Japan in the mid-1800s. Prior to American contact, Japan was an isolationist country. They believed in this policy to the extreme, even to the extent that fishermen who had shipwrecked on the shores of another country were not allowed to be repatriated back to Japan. Additionally, others who shipwrecked on Japan's shores were usually killed. Commodore Perry of the U.S. Navy went to Japan to force a trade agreement and would begin Japan on a road that would eventually lead to their attack in World War II. Commodore Perry's gunboat diplomacy forced Japan out of its isolationist ways and started a domino effect of Japan being forced into trade agreements, called unequal treaties, that led them severely disadvantaged at the signing of these treaties. As a result, the shogunate in Japan lost power, and that power was returned to the emperor during the Meiji Restoration and the following Meiji period. The emperor led the country out of isolationism and set goals for Japan to become as strong as the nations who treated them so unfairly. Japan quickly modernized its military forces, doing away with the samurai and building a modern army and navy who were loyal to the emperor. Many samurai laid down their traditional blades and armor and joined Japan's new navy. As part of its plan to become as strong as the nations that abused it in the 19th century, Japan decided that it needed to get equal weapons, equal technology, and one other thing. In order for Japan to be as strong as America, Britain, and other leading world nations, Japan would have to acquire an empire just like those other nations had. Seeking to improve its international standing, Japan joined the attacks on German territories in and near China during World War I. For its efforts, it was rewarded with much of those territories at the end of the war, which began its imperial expansion. Seeking to further expand its empire, Japan took control of Korea and then invaded China, beginning the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japan timed its invasion to take advantage of a civil war in China. This Second Sino-Japanese War would continue right up into World War II. Now, let's take a step back. Beginning in 1907, Japan had begun sending men to other nations to learn about and procure aircraft for development into weapons of war. In fact, Japan was the first to drop bombs from a plane when fighting the Germans in China during World War I. They dropped artillery shells and grenades from their cockpit windows. Japan eventually took the lead in improving aircraft, and by 1941, they had the best aircraft and some of the most skilled and experienced pilots on the planet. Then it happened.
I have the distinguished honor of presenting the President of the United States.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Launching from 6 aircraft carriers that had crossed the ocean in secret, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, pulling the United States into World War II. Guam, the Philippines, parts of India, French Indochina, and much of the West Indies all fell to Japan within a few months. During that time, Japan also proved that the airplane had displaced the battleship as the symbol of both naval power and strength. Not by sinking the 8 battleships anchored at Pearl Harbor, but by sinking a British battleship named HMS Prince of Wales while it was underway on the open sea. The face of naval warfare had changed forever. It is also important to know, especially here in Alaska, that Japan attacked several spots on the western coast of the continental United States. But more importantly, they invaded and took control of 2 of the Aleutian Islands. The Aleuts of Attu and Kiska were taken as prisoners of war by ship back to Japan, where they suffered nearly a 50% mortality rate during their captivity. This also triggered the evacuation of more Aleuts to southeast Alaska by the U.S. government, where they were inadequately housed, and as a result also suffered a high mortality rate, though not nearly as high as those taken to Japan. Unfortunately, this was also the time when Japanese Americans were rounded up and sent to internment camps as a matter of national security. It was a horrendous violation of American rights, and it was completely unconstitutional. Yet another black mark in our history books. The war ended with Japan's surrender after dropping of atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Unfortunately, that wouldn't be the end of the bad decisions that were made. Japan lost nearly all of the land it gained during and prior to the war. However, Okinawa was returned to Japan instead of the Okinawan people. Additionally, the United States decided to hold on to Korea instead of returning it to the Korean people. This eventually led to the division of North and South and the start of the Korean War. This presentation only scratches the surface of what this unit would cover. But World War II has caused repercussions that we are still dealing with today. It is important that our students learn this information, and I only hope that I can do justice to this need.